learn about the framework today. Hopefully everybody can take a wee bit of something from it and we can get a wee bit of feedback, which is useful for us as well. So I'll present for, it should be less than half an hour, and then after that we'll have a Q&A. So if you can think of any questions while I'm speaking, feel free to put them into the live chat function and we will address them at the end of the presentation. Also, if you would rather just speak your questions, you can just take a note of them, and I'm sure we should have time for that to be asked at the Q&A section as well. On top of that, I just want to say thanks to everybody that's provided a response to the questionnaire, which was issued with the PIN pre-market engagement notice in Public Contract Scotland. We did get quite a hefty response to that, so we haven't had a chance yet to go through all of the responses and properly digest the feedback that we've had, but there have been a lot of viewpoints that we've had for a wide range of sources that we need to take into consideration, and we will be doing that in the coming weeks. And hopefully it can inform the way that we go out to tender. So just as I mentioned, that questionnaire was part of the PIN notice. If anybody hasn't expressed interest in the PIN on Public Contract Scotland yet, I would advise you do that, just so that any updates that we publish in relation to the process, you get an email notification for that, and you'll be up to date with everything. But I'll begin the presentation. If my slides move, just first of all by covering what a framework agreement is on a high level for those who are unfamiliar. So basically it's an agreement which allows organisations like FLS to procure goods, services, and in this case civil engineering works from a list of pre-approved suppliers. So I'd say a list of pre-approved suppliers is probably a simplified version of how it is. I mean, basically what we're doing is we're splitting up that list into different work types within the scope of civil engineering, and then within each of those work types we will have different geographical sublots all across Scotland. So I'll come to that a wee bit later in the slides and explain exactly how we intend to split that up. Also, I'll be covering how we use the framework agreement to award work as and when requirements arise during the framework agreement duration. So just to clarify from the outset, there's no guarantee work upon joining a framework agreement. At that point, you're essentially just putting your name in the hat to potentially win work through the framework agreement in the future. And there's a few ways that we can do that through different call-off mechanisms that will be within the framework agreement. So different ways that we can award work through the framework agreement, and I'll advise on those as we go through the presentation as well. Just again to highlight, again for those that are unfamiliar, the differences between a contract and a framework agreement. So that could be a contract that we award through the framework agreement, or just a general contract out with this tender exercise. Generally with a framework agreement, there wouldn't be a commitment to deliver requirements as you're appointed to the framework agreement. As I've already highlighted, being appointed is just kind of putting your name in the hat to potentially win or tender for works through the framework agreement at a later date. However, the difference with a contract would be when you sign that contract, you're signing up with a commitment to deliver requirements, and as it points out in number 2 under contract there, those requirements would be to an exact scope with defined locations, deliverables, obligations, and obviously we can do that at that point and go into contract because we have a specific requirement, we know what it is we want, and we can specify as such. With a framework agreement, and as you'll probably see with the tender documentation when we go out to set up the framework agreement, the scope and information that we have in there is a bit more broad than you would find in a contract generally, just because we don't have a defined requirement at that point, and we're scoping the framework agreement to be able to accommodate a wide range of requirements that could come up throughout its life cycle. So generally the scoping would be a bit more broad. And with regards to terms and conditions, by signing up to the framework agreement, although you don't have a commitment to deliver requirements at that point, you're signing up with the agreement that the terms and conditions of the framework agreement are overarching, and they would overarch all of any call-off contracts that we award through the framework agreement. So those terms and conditions would be applicable to that. But then at the point of awarding contracts through the framework agreement, each one of those call-off contracts would have their own specific terms and conditions which would be relevant to that requirement as well. So there's really 2 stages from getting to the point we're at now, where we've got nothing to getting to the point of establishing the framework agreement, turning nothing into something, and getting to the point where we can use it to actually award works. So the point we're at now of establishing the framework, and that is what the tender we're going to be doing in the near future will relate to, will include a qualification, a technical and a commercial assessment. So we're required to do those 3 assessments under regulated tenders because this falls under, this is a regulated tender under the Public Contract Scotland regulations. So we need to do each of those assessments, and later in the presentation I'll give a wee bit more detail on what kind of things might be included in each. But on a high level basis, we would take the outcomes of those assessments and use that information to score all of the tenders that we've received through the tender exercise, and from that scoring we can then set up the structure of the framework agreement and establish the lots within that, and those lots would be based on work types, and within those work types different geographical areas. So from that scoring we can establish that and then rank the successful suppliers in terms of how they scored during that framework, during the tender as well. So call off, as I've kind of touched upon, is how we use the framework to award requirements as and when they arise once the framework agreement's in place. There is a few ways in which we can do that. I'll go into more detail later on, but just as I've pointed out there, we can do direct awards or other methods of further competition. So I'll explain those in a bit. And basically, once we've done that, we can use those call-off mechanisms to award those contracts, which would be under a specific scope with specific obligations through the framework agreement. So the overarching purpose of the framework agreement, it will become FLS's primary route to market for civil engineering requirements from March 2026. The framework agreement will be in place for 4 years, which is the maximum length of time we can put in place a framework agreement. So it will be covering us for quite a bit of time in the future, but March 2026 is when we expect it to commence. So if you've had access to the PIN and the documentation within that, you'll have seen that we intend to separate the framework agreement up into different lot streams. Those lot streams all covering different specialisms and different streams of work. The reason we've done that is to, in one sense, allow greater access to SMEs who maybe only provide certain types of works. So if you only maybe provide crushing, you can apply for the crushing lot alone. If you also provide maintenance of small scale works, you can go for the both of them. But it's to allow you to really bid for the lots that you specialise in, and at the same time, if you do cover all these different types of works, there's nothing stopping you from bidding across all of the different lot types as well. So again, within the supporting documentation within the PIN, we laid out some kind of high-level lists of things which might be included in each of the lots. I'd just like to say that these aren't necessarily exhaustive lists. They're just to give you an idea of what could be included in there. And this is what we've got under maintenance and small-scale works at the moment, and large-scale works and grading. So similarly for the crushing, new bridges and bridge maintenance and panel bridges lots, we've gave some examples there of what might be included. Again, not necessarily exhaustive lists. And I appreciate, as I touched on at the start, we have had a bit of feedback that we've not properly had the time to go through yet completely as a team. But having scanned it myself, I did see that we did get wee bits and bobs of feedback on why certain things were placed in certain lots and maybe they would be better placed elsewhere. So any feedback in relation to that, which we've already received through the questionnaire, we will be coming to that and reviewing that, and everybody's viewpoints will be taken into consideration. So and that's how we're intending to split it up in terms of work types. I did say that within each of those work types, we intend to split the lots up on a geographical basis as well in each region. So at the moment, we're in the process of developing maps which will show how we intend to split the work types up in each region. And what we're going to do is do a wee follow-up to the market engagement that we've already done, whereby we'll probably be inviting everybody that's here or asking everybody that's here today, everybody that's expressed interest in the PIN, everybody that responded to the questionnaire, to look at the maps and the lots within those that we're intending to go with, and give us an indication of which ones you would be bidding for in the tender. And that'll obviously inform us as to whether the approach we're taking is going to give us the level of interest that we need in each lot. So if we just look at this table for a moment, I've tried to, in the absence of those maps, I've tried to kind of display it in a numerical sense as to how we're going to split it up. So if we look at the work types across the top, we've got the 5 work types and then the regions along the side in this top section of the table. So looking at North region, for example, that's indicating that for small scale and maintenance, we intend to have 5 lots in North region for that, 3 lots in North region for large scale and grading, 2 for crushing, and 2 for the bridge maintenance and new bridges lots. The same can be said for South region, Central region, all the other regions. You can see that we've got a number of lots intended to be in place in each region for each of those different work types. The outlier on that is panel bridges, as we don't intend to split that one up regionally, as that'll be a single national lot. So if we move down to the next section of the table, we've got the max number of contractors per lot. So what we're basically saying here, as you can see, it's generally 6 across them all. So generally, for all lots in the framework other than panel bridges, there will be a maximum of 6 contractors in each lot. So out of the bids that we receive for each lot, the six highest scoring bids that are also compliant will be placed on each lot and ranked in order of how highly they scored in the technical and commercial evaluation. And again, the outlier on that is the panel bridges, whereby we'll have a maximum of 4 contractors on that lot. So the last section of the table at the bottom, the max number of lots to be tendered, that's essentially a limitation on how many lots a tenderer can bid for across the different work types. So for small scale and maintenance, a tenderer can only bid for 10 lots in total, large scale and grading 8 lots in total, crushing 6, bridge maintenance and new bridges 6. And the intention behind that is that we want to encourage contractors to bid for the areas where they feel they could provide the best value for money service to FLS. So if we can concentrate our bids in those areas, that's the purpose of that part. And as I say, I will be following this up with the maps that we're developing through a second stage of pre-market engagement, and it would just likely be sharing those maps and asking you to provide us with feedback on what lots you would intend to bid for, and we'll also stipulate those intended limitations in the number of lots that can be bid for as well. So in terms of how to access the tender notice, the contract notice will be published onto Public Contract Scotland in a similar way as the PIN notice was, so you'll be able to access it similarly. From there, the tender will take place on Public Contract Scotland tender, so you'll be linked through the notice on Public Contract Scotland to the actual tendering portal on Public Contract Scotland tender. We're intending to arrange a tender training session through Supplier Development Programme after the notice is published. And basically, for anybody who's interested, if you're maybe unfamiliar with using these tendering portals, it will give you an opportunity to have a session whereby you'll be taken through the process from accessing the notice in Public Contract Scotland right through to submitting your bid and accessing all the documentation on Public Contract Scotland tender. So, as I said previously, the evaluation process is based on 3 different assessments: a qualification assessment, a technical assessment, and a commercial assessment. So the qualification assessment is whereby you must submit what's known as the single procurement document, or the SPD, as has already been noted, not to be confused with SDP. They're quite confusing acronyms, but it's the SPD you're submitting as part of the qualification envelope. So this is essentially a pass-fail assessment. It's split into 3 main sections. The first section is just general information about the bidding organisation. The pass-fail element's pretty inapplicable there. It's just kind of for information, that section. The exclusion grounds information, that's just a series of yes or no questions that you need to answer, and it's just checking whether you should be excluded from the tender process on legal or ethical grounds. But a fairly straightforward one to complete, given that it's a yes or no section, and that is pass-fail. The selection criteria, third section, so this is probably the most flexible, most customisable section from our point of view, whereby essentially we are setting out what the minimum requirements we would have for a contractor to be awarded a place on the framework agreement. So I've gave some examples of things that could be covered in there. It could be things like just checking that you've got the levels of insurance that we would expect you to have. There could be things like qualifications in there, health and safety management processes, environmental management certification or processes. But that would be we would be asking for that on a pass-fail, either confirmation or evidence-based kind of request. And just that list there now, it's just a kind of example list. So just to give you an idea what could be in there, that's not necessarily what's going to be in there. So if you pass the qualification envelope, your technical and commercial responses would then be evaluated. So for the purposes of the framework agreement evaluation, the technical to commercial ratio will be 30%, 70%. And within that, the technical envelope will require you to complete a series of technical questions whereby they'll then be assessed by FLS and scored. Basically, because we're splitting the framework up into different lot types with different work streams and different specialisms, what we intend to do is we'll have a few common questions that everybody will have to answer no matter what lot you're bidding for, because they'll just kind of generally apply across all the lots. But then there'll be one lot specific technical question within each of those work types, and you would obviously only answer that lot specific question if you're bidding for those that lot type. So we aim, because we've split it up into those different specialisms, we aim to make those questions focused and tailored, relatable to the works that are actually going to be procured through those lot types. And so what you could expect when you come at, say you were bidding for the crushing lot, or say you were bidding for the small scale maintenance lot alone, you would answer the common questions, probably a few common questions it would be, and then you would answer that one lot specific question for the small scale and maintenance, and that would be the only questions you would need to answer, and you would just be submitting that response. It would be the same response in all of the different areas that you would want to work in for that lot type. If you were bidding for more lots, you would do the common questions, more lot types, as in more work types. You would do the common questions just the same, but then you would do the lot specific question for each of those different lot types that you would be bidding for. So we are trying to reduce the number of questions overall that we've asked maybe in previous exercises, to make it a bit more of an accessible process, because I appreciate it as a burdensome task doing these kind of responses, but just trying to make the questions that we ask a wee bit more focused, and reducing the number without compromising on the assurances that we get for them. For the commercial side, we will be issuing a price list for each of the different lot types, and then there may just be slight differences in quantities and things like that, depending on what the expectations are within different geographical areas. So if you're bidding for different areas, say you're only bidding for the one lot type and you're bidding for different areas, you would just have to fill in that price list for each of the different areas that you were bidding for within that lot type, and the same would apply across all the different lot types. It will be a bespoke price list for each of the different lot types, obviously, with price lines that are relevant to the work that would be taking place within the scope of that work type. I would say we have had some feedback in relation to the commercial approach, which hasn't been properly looked through yet through the questionnaire, but it will be. We might do, as I said previously, we're going to be doing a wee follow-up to the market engagement in relation to the lotting, and your preferences in relation to that when we share the maps with you. But we probably will do a wee bit more investigating into the commercial side, just to get more feedback on that and make sure that what we go out with is fit for purpose. But for the purposes of the overall framework agreement evaluation, this is how it will generally work. You'll have that qualification piece, and then you'll have your technical side with the common questions and the lot specific questions for whatever lots you're going for, and then the specific price list for each lot that you're going for as well. So once the framework agreement is established, there are a few call-off options that we can use. Those are direct award, mini competition, and desktop evaluation. So direct award, this is basically, it's probably the quickest route that can be used, whereby you would essentially define the requirement, you would go to the lot that it relates to, and you would go to the first rank contractor on that lot. You would inquire whether they've got the capacity at that time to complete the work. If they did, you would progress on that basis. If not, you would move to second ranked on the list. If they couldn't do it, you would move to third, and so on until you get a contractor on that lot that can provide the works required. Mini competition, this is whereby we would be reopening the technical and commercial evaluation, and we would be setting new technical and commercial criteria which would be specific to the requirement that we were tendering for at that point. So that's your kind of difference between the framework agreement evaluation, where we're kind of evaluating on a more general basis because we don't have a specific defined requirement, but at the point of mini competition we would have that requirement, and we would be able to tailor the technical questions that we would ask based on the specific requirements of the job. And the same with the commercial side, we would be asking bespoke price lines which are specific to the work which would be taking place. So all suppliers in the lot can be invited to bid in that, or all suppliers in the lot must be invited to bid in that, I should say. And we would be awarding to the highest scoring supplier from that re-evaluation of the tailored specific technical and commercial criteria that we set. So the third one there, desktop evaluation, is similar to a mini competition in that it's obviously, it provides more opportunities to more suppliers on the framework agreement rather than direct award, just going to the first rank contractor. So it has got that advantage that we would be inviting all suppliers in the lot each time we've done it. The difference is that, well, while we would still be evaluating technically and commercially, we wouldn't actually be reopening the technical side with new criteria. We would just be carrying forward the technical scores that we got at the framework level, applying those, and then reopening the commercial side. So basically, the scoring would be calculated based on whatever you scored technically at the framework agreement level, and then we would provide new price lines based on the specifics of the work that would be taking place, and that would take up the other half of the evaluation. So award would go to the highest ranked supplier from that re-evaluation of the commercial side, in addition to the framework technical evaluation scores. And just to highlight, we can amend weightings at that point for mini competition and desktop evaluation as well. If we wanted to put more weighting on the technical side, we could do so, and we don't need to stick to what we've done at the framework agreement level. One more thing I just wanted to cover, because we did touch on it on the questionnaire, we got a bit of feedback on this, is our approach to community benefits for this framework. So they will be applicable, but I just want to stress that we are taking measures to make sure that any obligations that would be put on contractors in relation to community benefits, we're aiming to make them as proportionate to the spend that's been recorded through the framework agreement as possible. So the way we intend to do that is, through the framework, have a list of potential community benefits which could be delivered, and then from that list we would be allocating a point or a number of points to each of those community benefits. And basically, the more resource intensive, the more difficult it is to deliver a community benefit, the higher number of points that we'd have allocated to it. So we will be taking into consideration the feedback that we've had in the questionnaire to kind of help us allocate points to, or numbers of points to, different community benefits. So for instance, if there's something like targeted apprenticeships, that would be something which would probably be allocated a higher number of points, maybe than something like engaging with a local community, because just the resource intensivity of, obviously, and the difficulty in attracting apprentices and whatnot. So we need to go through that feedback that we've had, but basically that's how we intend to do it. These monetary figures that are in this table just now, they're just basically there to provide an example at this moment of how it would work. So basically how it would work is, at the end of your first year in the framework agreement, if you've had spend through the framework agreement in your framework review meeting, we would sit down, we would look at how much spend you had recorded. So let's say, looking at that table, you had recorded £100,000 through the framework in that first year. You wouldn't then be required to deliver any community benefits on the back of that. However, if we sat down and you had recorded £300,000 at the end of your first year, we would be saying that for the next year, you'll be required to deliver 1 point of community benefits. So at that point, you would sit with a contract manager at that point, and you would agree on what community benefits you would be aiming to deliver in the next 12 months of the framework agreement. From that list that we will be creating with the points allocated to it. So just so, like, basically trying to highlight that by being appointed to the framework agreement, it's not like you're just going to be expected to deliver that straight away. And again, those figures that are in there now are just there for the purpose of example at this point, so don't take them as gospel. So I just want to give an indication as well of the timescales that we're working to for this. We're intending to publish the tender in early to mid-September. Obviously, we've still got to look through the feedback that we've had through the questionnaire, and we might get more back in relation to the lotting and pricing and whatever. So we will be taking that. We might need time to take that into consideration, and it might slightly affect the timelines. But I would stress, as I've said before, if you haven't signed up or if you haven't expressed interest in the PIN on Public Contract Scotland, please do so, because any kind of significant changes to this timeline would be notified on there through the additional information section of the PIN. And if you've expressed interest in it, you should get an automatic email just notifying you any changes like that. But on the basis that we were able to tender in kind of the first half of next month, first half of September, we would be looking to get responses back in late October, likely, and that would be an outlook to awarding in January and commencing the framework in March 2026. So that's really everything I wanted to cover. Just wanted to say thanks to everybody for coming along today. We will be inviting questions now, and we'll try and, obviously, our requirements and what we intend to do are still in development, so we'll try and answer questions as best as we can, and just keep an eye out, because I will be following up probably with that second engagement piece just with regards to lotting preferences and potentially a bit in pricing as well. So if we could get any further feedback on that, that would be really valuable to us, and we would appreciate it. But thanks for listening, and take questions.